I think as a sport, we need to start looking at these things that are acceptable, not acceptable. We need to have more of these sort of forums where we start to form these opinions, and then we need to start making that so that comes out of the sport. At a very grassroots level, we start looking at those kids and their education. One of the things I see in course design that I think has changed in the last few years is people used to go to top events. They used to go to Punchestown, and then you guarantee the year after Punchestown, somebody in Ireland would have built something that was there. Yeah? So they took the top events and they downscaled those exercises to be education. Yeah? Nowadays they don't do that. Nowadays, 80 is a lot of logs around the outside of a field. You know, preferably on the flat, preferably so everybody jumps clear so they all have fun. That's good, but it doesn't prepare them for the levels going up through. Yeah? I think in a way we need to think cross-country has to be something special. It cannot be just a group of logs on a 3-stride turning arc or a 4-stride turning arc. Then we live in a situation where we're a very weak neighbour to show jumping. Yeah? To me, cross-country is about crossing the country. It's about jumping banks. I don't care whether there's a fence on top of the bank or not on top of the bank, whether the bank is 1 metre high, 60 centimetres high. It's that ability to be able to shift and move and do that, and the riders to be able to do that. And because they can't do that, you put a ditch in your normal 80 centimetre competition, unaffiliated or national competition, and you have half the riders eliminated at it. So they take it out. Yeah? And that's the thought process from the riders a little bit. That actually I won't go there because I can't jump that ditch. Yeah? What you should look at as a course designer is how you get them to that so they can jump it and so that they have a more successful time over that ditch. What they should look at is actually that's a level of education that I need to put into myself and my horse. How I progress forward in the sport is to do with how I train and what facilities I have to train over. There is a raft of people that you are never going to affect. There is a raft of people that say that anybody sits on a horse is a posh hoity-toity and we want nothing to do with them, and that sitting on horses is cruel. Yeah? You aren't going to affect those. But there are a whole raft of people that are in the middle ground. You know, for every one of those outspoken people, there's another outspoken person that thinks it's personally acceptable for you to lose 3 horses in the Grand National and shoot 3 horses and it's still a good day sport. Yeah? Both of those two things are extreme. Yeah? But they aren't the bulk of people. The bulk of people are pretty ambivalent. If you go to the middle of Dublin and you chat to a guy in an estate and talk to him about eventing, he probably hasn't got a clue what you're talking about. Yeah? So they don't have an opinion. And we're going to try and make their opinion. We have to start to guide our sport in a way that fosters their opinion forward, to take it as that is a bloody good sport. The thing we have in our sport that stops it being able to be one of those dangerous sports is we have an animal that we're going to put under pressure to do that. You can't do that with horses. You can't do that with dogs. Yeah, you can do that as a Formula One driver because it's your choice. Yep, you can't do that with horses. So we have to back off that and look at how we maintain the sport for where we are. What do we want to see from our courses nowadays? What do you think a good course should be?
Have plenty of variety.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. That's the one trouble with the MIM clip, you see. To me, that's one of the heart of the MIM clip problems, is not to do with the scoring and whether it's exciting or anything else. It's how it limits you on your build. Yeah? It is getting better. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And with a bit of imagination, you can do it. You know, you can make different things mimable and deformable. There was a big movement last year to try and bring in a flag penalty. When if a horse knocked a flag down, it would pick up, but not a big penalty, like 2 penalties or something like that. Yeah? And I know the bulk of this room would probably be very anti that. Yeah? Yeah. I was very for it. Absolutely. Yeah. It depended on how the flag was fastened. Yeah. So it had to be in a more old-fashioned sort of, you had to give it a proper clunk to knock it down. Yeah. What would be the arguments? The arguments against it are, is it makes you ride you backwards. Yeah. It made you protective. So this was what they said. It would make riding worse because people wouldn't be able to flow forward to fences anymore. Yeah. I couldn't see an argument that you could put against that rule that you couldn't put against the invention of jumping corners. So when whoever invented the first corner to jump, so initially cross-country started, it was a lot of logs, then it went forward from there. Yeah. When the guy first built a corner and you had to be accurate and ride to the point of it, you could say that taught you to ride backwards. But actually, because time comes into it and it makes you more accurate and makes you ride better. Yeah. The same with the triple brushes. How many skinny fences do you have on your courses nowadays? Yeah, probably too many. I thought that. I think that's quite... We've got away from a natural feel of cross-country courses. And a lot of old questions have disappeared and been replaced by skinnies. Why have they been replaced by skinny fences? Fantastic. Absolutely. Yeah. We all know particular course designers that come down to a metre 10 jumpable width on a fence. Yeah. That's not fair on a horse. A horse can't fit through a metre 10. Yeah, alone with a rider on top of it. So to me, they should be part of nature. Cross-country courses. They should fit into the nature of a site. They should offer... And they should change that variety, that the horses can jump a ditch, that they can slow down, that they can trot to a fence. How many fences nowadays do you see on cross-country courses where they have to break back to a trot to jump them? Never. Is that an acceptable thing or not? Is it an acceptable skill? Yes. To have to come back and trot down a bank to jump something? Yeah? Yeah. To me, that's an acceptable skill. Yeah, but where does education come from? Education comes from, this is the exam, learn the skills to do it. Not, these are the skills I have, can you write me an exam? Yeah? And that's sort of where we're heading with course design. These are the skills I have. Yeah? I have a flat arena. I want to practice cross-country. So what can I practice? I can practice skinny fences. I can practice those really twisty, wiggly lines. Yeah? I can't practice anything very big because I can't build that in my arena. So actually what I want is little courses with lots of skinny lines. Years ago there was a statistic that Mickey Young and Millie Dumar, now Mickey Young you would have all heard of, Millie Dumar some of you might not have done, yeah, had the best cross-country statistic in the FEI records. And I thought, what on earth do those two have in common? One lives in Somerset, down in the south of England, is, competing. She had a 5-star horse, but, normally 4-star, 3-star horses, etc. And the other's Michael doing his thing. So I looked at them. Actually, the thing they had in common was they both had a school that was attached to a cross-country course without a fence around the outside of it. Both of them could work their horses on the flat and do a bit of dressage, and then go straight into the field, canter out, jump a coffin, jump a ditch, splash through the water, come back, do some show jumping. They could be in the middle of a show jumping session and go out. Jill Watson went to watch to Mickey Young's, and she said he was show jumping a horse, and he said then he went out, he was flat working a horse. and it was a bit behind the leg and a bit stuffy and what have you. And then he gave it a big kick. He canted out the arena. He ran it up a bank, jumped it over a big oxer on top of a bank, down through a water jump, through something else, came back in the arena and went diagonally across the arena and did a series of 2-time changes up the arena. Yeah? So cross country, flat work, all that thing was all involved together with that facility. And that goes back to that regular repetition of training that joins the two things together. So cross-country courses should have flow. They should build confidence. Now that's where you go back to with your skinny fences and looking for your cheap penalty, is that you drain the confidence away from horses. To me, I have a thing that I call negative fences and positive fences. So 2 square oxers, 2 bullfinches, they're positive fences, yeah? You have to ride forward to. And something like a coffin or a sunken road is a negative fence. You have to shorten to jump it, yeah? You should never follow skinny fences and negative fences. You have to hold and wait and keep a line, yeah? You should never follow a negative fence with another negative fence. You should always go positive, negative, positive, negative. You can have running jump fences in between so that you keep the horses in front of the leg and going. If you slowed them down to jump through a little sunken road, then your next combination should be give them a chance to kick and move up. Yeah? That comes out of a sort of instinctive horsey thing that you would all know when you're riding, you know, from when you were all competing and hunting and things, that actually you want to get your horses travelling across the country. You know, when you're coaching, how many times do you say kick it and how many times do you say fiddle with your reins and slow it down? 9 times out of 10 when you're teaching them on the flat or anything, most people it's actually you've got to ride it forward. To get it straight, you've got to ride it forward. To do anything with it, you've got to ride it to the contact. Yep. So confidence building, education, that goes back into what we've talked about before, variety of cross-country courses. Cross-country courses shouldn't be on a flat piece of ground with a group of portables. Yeah. I know that's the cheapest thing and it produces a profitable result for an organiser, but there should be some education in it that reflects, and right the way through the levels, you know. I am not anti running a horse up a bank to a small gate in an 80 centimetre competition. Yeah? Something that they look at and think, oh, that's quite good. Horses off a steep bank will jump anything. Yeah? And you can do that and it brings in the education, it gets the people riding cross country. And it starts to build them forward. Progression through the levels. That's a classic one that we're struggling with at the moment. That your 5-star events stand in a little sort of island at the top. And then the gap between it, you know, in the UK, we used to have those Dimes, Brigstock, Belton, you know, they were enormous tracks. By the time you got to Badminton, you knew what you were sat on. Yeah? And if you weren't going well in those events, you can go to Badminton. That doesn't happen now. Not wishing to be rude, but the events pre-Badminton, there isn't a pre-Badminton event in the UK now that is not designed by the organiser of the event at 4-star level. Yeah? Does that have an effect? Why does it have an effect?
Because they want people to get around.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because the financial influence of that, they don't employ a designer to come in and design it. They do it themselves. Their interest is actually they've got to get a good result. They haven't got to necessarily put those horses to that educational process. So then that becomes harder for at least the horses at the top exposed, I think. This is just a little bit about public, for event organisers. I just thought I'd quickly run through this. Showing the sport off well. Yeah? For social media side, for, getting people interested. Site layout, access to and from the track sites. Are too many places I go to when your public crosses over your main horse entrance. Yeah? I never really thought about this when I was riding, till I had 2 little kids, and me and my wife were riding, and my mother used to push the kids around. And then that becomes a nightmare, because suddenly you've got my mother that's sort of getting older, with two kids that are fairly feral, running in all directions, yeah, and they've got to cross over the main thoroughfare of the horses. You know, you need to think about those things, spectator areas, where it's easy to walk the course. We've done that at Badminton even, yeah. Badminton course has changed a lot. We go in that sort of clover shape. So good courses to me are like a clover that you have a central hub and then you work out, and we do that 2 or 3 times at Badminton now. I think the days of people walking at 5-star level, standing 10 back in a crowd, waiting for the people to clear in front of them, get into the front, watch one horse jump it, and then they move on to the next one. That's going to go, yeah? We've got to start thinking about how that public experience works, that they can sit and they can drink a cup of coffee and they can watch 3 or 4 fences from one place and then they move to another place. So certainly even at somewhere like Badminton, it's very established in what they do. We've changed that a little bit, so we've created these sort of spectator areas with refreshments and things, and public access and crossing points. Serious incident management plan. That's the place you get into a lot of trouble at events with the social media side. When something goes wrong, when you're not fast enough to get your screens around the outside of fences, around the outside of the incident, when you're not fast enough to get the ambulance there, that is about, I put 5 P's, we all know that's 6 P's, but we'll miss out the swear word in the middle of it. Proper preparation, that sim meeting before you run an event, yeah, when you know exactly where the ambulance is, how it's going to work, so that you cover up those things as soon as possible. If a horse is injured or a rider is injured, they shouldn't be there for more than a minute without a screen around the outside. Yeah? And that's a social licensing thing. To me, it sits at the heart of making our sport look good, is to actually not leave those guys in that situation unexposed, and, you know. So screens, medics, all those sort of things. We're not very good at putting our positives forward. We've talked a bit about name clips. When you talk to social media, or you talk to those guys, you know, any press people, think about what you're going to say beforehand. And especially if you have an incident, and you have to be reacting to that. You know, as a course designer, it's often a thing. You know, if you have an incident on cross country, and that happens, I don't care if you are the best course designer in the world, you will have horses that injure themselves. Because they do that in the field. So they're likely to do it at some stage, you know, when you're there. Think about the positives before you ever talk to the press. Yeah? And have a thing, you know, but talk about how many horses have jumped the fence well. Talk about it's easy when you have a negative situation like that to go back into, oh dear, it's terrible, and you start apologising rather than going with the positives of how many horses have jumped it, how many people have enjoyed the day, how fantastic the day has been till this incident, etc. Yeah? So try and put a positive spin on it. Can social media work for us? Why do we get into trouble with this whole social acceptance thing? Because we use social media all the time. Because it is the best way of advertising. It's the best way of projecting your sport. Of creating characters out of riders. Yeah? Of showing your sport off. My daughter works for Keyflow Feeds. That's all she does. She's an advertising manager for Keyflow Feeds, and she just goes out and collects films of people doing stuff with, you know, that are fed on that feed, and because she said there's no other sort of advertising nowadays that gives you as good a response for the amount of money you put into it. You know, I said to you, you have one bad incident, you have one guy beating his horse over a log, that can hit 1 million people. So it can be a negative thing, but also similarly, yeah, a great story, that can be a very positive thing. It can drive the sport forward and give you chances that you can't have any other way. The difficulty with it is, it gets away from you real quick, social media. Yeah? It can become a very different story very fast, and any idiot can comment. And that's the hardest thing I think we all find. I think I'm fairly general in this room. But actually, you've got to accept that. That is part of the sport. Part of social media is the people, as you said, that are going to be criticising you have no idea about what they're talking about. And I think that's the world we live in nowadays, when you have those 15-minute experts. So you've got to be truthful, you've got to be open, and you've got to be fair. You know. At the end of the day, if you injure a horse cross country, or something serious happens like that, that is not ideal. Say it. Say we're really upset, this is not what we wanted, etc., etc. Don't hide behind it, you know. It's great to say lots of horses had positive experiences, etc., etc., but be as upset as they are. You know, because we want to portray the sport as feeling, as, you know. Another thing I think that plays into this, I really need to stop because I'm running over time vastly. As course designers, we need to be less bloody precious as well. Anybody that walks up to us and says, I'm not sure about the distance at 1 to 2 or 5 to 6 or whatever, yeah? We get so defensive. So, actually, everybody's entitled to their opinion. Take it on board, talk about it, be open, encourage other people to come and talk. I hate that thing, which we have a little bit at the moment, where one course designer never has a positive thing to say about another course designer. They never go to a course and pick out the 5 good things that course designer's done. Yeah? They never go to a course. I've got a couple of fences at Badminton this year that came directly off a guy burnt. That's it. Yeah, burnt backhouse. I walked this course, I thought that's really inspiring. I could do that. I could use that in a different way, with different fences. Yeah? So I went up to him afterwards, I said, that's fab. I said, I've really nicked, I hope you don't mind, I've nicked my heels. Yeah? When was the last time you found somebody that did that? We don't go. Pardon? Absolutely. But we're very bad at telling them. We're very bad at encouraging people about picking up, and that's a coaching thing. I'm sure Sharon will get into it. You know, positives for coaching. If I say don't think of a pink elephant, you think of a pink elephant straight away. Yeah? If I say when I'm coaching, if you pick up on the bad stuff, when they walk out the arena, you say you did that wrong, that wrong, that wrong. They automatically think of that wrong, think of the bits they did badly, never the bits that they did well. When my kids were little, yeah, and I used to cut videos, if we have a real crap weekend, I would cut videos together of the fences they jumped good. It might only have been 4 fences out of 127, but I would pick out the 4 good fences, because when they sat down at home and they watched the video of themselves, I didn't want them to recreate the terrible stuff they did, I just want them to recreate the good stuff. If you can just reinforce the good stuff, and I think we need to get a bit better at that as course designers, be a little bit less precious, a little bit actually learn from the experience of chatting to all those people. Yeah? Don't expect them to be polite about everything. I used to use Andrew Nicholson as a sounding board all the time. You know, when I was started up designing, because I lived in a similar area, and Andrew would, you know, write my courses, and I'd always phone him up the day after and say, what do you think? That's not because you want the polite answer, trust me. Yeah. But it's because you want to get better and you want to improve. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap there because I've gone on for far too long. I've not really stuck to my brief at all, but I hope I haven't bored you all to death. Thank you very much.